Have you ever tried to, like, describe the letter A to someone who's never seen it?
Yeah.
It's harder than you think.
It is.
There's a whole science to breaking down those letter forms.
Yeah.
And for Sinhala script, it gets really fascinating.
Absolutely. We take it for granted.
We do.
All this visual language we see every day.
Yeah. So today we are diving into the evolution of Sinhala script.
Okay.
From ancient carvings to the digital fonts we use now. You sent over some excerpts from a thesis.
Yes.
About the anatomy of Sinhala type.
Right.
So we're going to unpack some of the cool parts.
Right.
And connect them to the wider world of design and typography.
Looking forward to it.
The thesis starts by looking at how Sinhala script evolved across different writing surfaces and tools. Imagine ancient Sri Lankans chiseling letters onto cave walls.
Oh, wow.
The effort involved is mind-boggling.
And what's interesting is how different surfaces presented unique challenges that actually influenced the style of the script.
Yeah.
So, for example, cave inscriptions high up, difficult to access, tend to be a lot more varied in style than inscriptions on pillars or slabs.
Right, which were easier to work with.
Much easier to work with, yeah.
So the very act of writing, the tools, the surfaces, all shaped the script's visual DNA.
Absolutely.
The thesis also mentions that Sinhala letters took on a more circular form when they began appearing on palm leaves.
Right, because the flexible nature of palm leaves encouraged a more fluid, rounded writing style, unlike rigid stone.
Right.
So it adapted to its environment.
It makes you realize the thought and intention behind each curve and stroke. Then, boom, the printing press arrives in the 18th century.
Oh, yeah.
And everything changes again.
Big time.
What happened to Sinhala script then?
Well, the printing press ushered in a new era of standardization.
What?
The need for reusable uniform type for mass production resulted in a more refined and consistent style of Sinhala script.
So each technological leap brought a new visual chapter to Sinhala script.
Yeah.
It really emphasizes how typography is so much more than just pretty letters. It's a visual record of history and innovation.
I like that visual record of history and innovation. And this is just the beginning. It goes even deeper, dissecting the anatomy of individual Sinhala letters.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
The thesis talks about these distinct visual properties, or DVPs. It's like an anatomical guide to understanding the building blocks of Sinhala letter forms.
It's like putting a letter under a microscope. And breaking it down into its fundamental components. So the thesis identifies base strokes, eyes, hooks, loops, each with its own variations and nuances.
And these details are fascinating.
They are.
The thesis mentions, for example, that the eye in Sinhala letters isn't always a perfect circle. Sometimes it's open, sometimes it's closed, and sometimes it even has a little stroke that looks like an eyelid.
That's right.
Who knew a letter could have such personality?
And even the loop, which seems like such a simple element, has so much variation. It can be positioned differently and have all sorts of interesting sub-properties. These distinctions are really important when you're analyzing different typefaces and understanding their unique styles and history.
It really highlights the complexity of the script.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder how these DVPs compare to the way we describe Latin letter forms.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
These differences reflect not just aesthetic choices, but also the cultural and historical context in which the scripts developed. They each have their own unique visual rules and building blocks.
So we've established that Sinhala letters have their own unique anatomy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the typefaces themselves.
Okay.
How have they changed over time?
Well, the thesis actually analyzed historical Sinhala typefaces from 3 different periods. Pre-newspaper, early newspaper, and modern.
What were those very early pre-newspaper typefaces like?
Those early typefaces dating back to the 1730s were often quite large. Think of them like the display typefaces we see today. Primarily used for headlines or official documents.
That makes sense before newspapers were common.
Right.
There wasn't as much need for smaller, easy-to-read typefaces for large amounts of text.
Right. Then in the 19th century, newspapers started appearing all over Sri Lanka. That led to a boom in typeface development, with new weights and styles to meet the demands of newspaper printing.
I imagine those newer typefaces were smaller and more compact.
Exactly.
Designed to fit more text onto a page.
Exactly. And this era also saw the emergence of distinct typographic styles.
Okay.
Reflecting the different voices or perspectives of the newspapers.
Interesting.
It's really interesting to see how typography becomes so closely tied
to the social and political landscape of a place.
Bringing it to the present day, we have the modern era.
Yes.
This must be where digital typefaces enter the scene.
Absolutely. The digital era has seen an explosion of new Sinhala typefaces.
Right.
But this has also brought new challenges.
Okay.
Maintaining originality and consistency.
Yeah.
In a digital world where fonts can be easily copied and changed, becomes really important.
It seems like the digital age has both democratized and complicated the world of typography.
It really has.
Yeah.
And this leads to a fascinating part of the thesis.
Sure.
How to design new Sinhala typefaces.
Okay, tell me more.
The thesis dives into the idea of using root letters.
Okay.
And a circular grid system as the foundation for designing typefaces.
Root letters are those like the fundamental building blocks of a typeface.
They are, think of them as templates that contain the most common distinct visual properties, or DVPs. They act as the foundation for creating other letters.
Ensuring consistency and visual harmony within a typeface.
That's really clever. And what about this circular grid?
Yeah.
What's the significance of circles in this context?
The circular grid helps designers maintain balance and proportion within the Sinhala letterforms.
Okay.
It brings order and structure to the design process, especially when working with the complex shapes and curves of the script.
I never thought of it that way. It's like a hidden framework guiding the design.
Exactly.
It's like a blueprint for a building.
Exactly. And this framework creates so many possibilities.
Yeah.
Imagine designing a whole new font.
Right.
Based on these building blocks, playing with different combinations of DVPs and adding stylistic touches.
It's amazing to think that every letter we see, every typeface we use is built on this incredibly detailed foundation of visual properties and design principles.
And it's not just about aesthetics.
Right.
Each typeface carries a rich history and a unique visual language, reflecting the cultural and technological evolution of the script it represents.
This deep dive has given me a whole new appreciation for the art and science of typography.
There's always more to uncover.
Yeah.
But we've only just started exploring this fascinating subject.
Before we go further, I'd love to hear from you, the listener.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on the journey of Sinhala script so far?
Yeah.
What surprises you most about the anatomy of Sinhala letters and typefaces? Share your thoughts. And we'll be back soon to explore even more fascinating insights from this thesis.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Sinhala typefaces. Before we paused, you mentioned those root letters.
Yes.
The fundamental building blocks of typeface design. It's a concept with implications that go way beyond just aesthetics.
It is crucial.
So how did the thesis go about actually identifying which letters should be considered root letters for Sinhala script?
Right.
It couldn't have been as simple as just picking random letters, could it?
Not at all. The thesis actually explored a couple of different approaches to pinpointing the most efficient and representative set of root letters. One method involved looking at how many distinct visual properties, or DVPs, each letter contained. The idea was to find those key letters that packed the most punch in terms of visual information.
Kind of like finding the genetic code of a typeface.
That's a great way to think about it. Using this approach, the thesis identified 11 root letters for Sinhala, each carefully chosen for its unique combination of DVPs. These root letters, like pa, ga, and ka, became the foundation for generating a wide range of other Sinhala letters.
I could see that would be a really useful tool for typeface designers.
Yeah.
Did the thesis explore any other ways to identify these root letters?
Yes. The second method used the circular grid we discussed earlier by analyzing how different letters could be constructed using this grid. The thesis proposed a slightly different set of 10 root letters.
So this method prioritized the geometric construction of the letters rather than just focusing on the number of DVPs.
Exactly. This approach really highlighted the importance of visual harmony and proportion in Sinhala typeface design. While the two methods resulted in slightly different sets of root letters, they both emphasize the idea that certain letters play a more foundational role in building a typeface.
It's fascinating that multiple approaches can lead to Different but equally valid insights.
Yeah.
How does this knowledge actually benefit typeface designers in a practical sense?
Imagine you're a designer creating a brand new Sinhala typeface.
Oh.
Understanding root letters and their distinct visual properties
Uh-huh.
allows you to approach the process systematically, ensuring consistency and legibility across all the characters you create.
So it's not just about randomly drawing aesthetically pleasing letters.
Right.
There's a real method to the madness.
Precisely. It's about understanding the underlying structure of the script.
Yeah.
And using that knowledge to create typefaces that are both beautiful and functional.
Okay.
And the thesis goes even further, exploring how even subtle variations in those root letters can create dramatically different styles.
Now we're getting to the artistic side of typeface design.
Yeah.
What kind of variations are we talking about?
Right.
How much can you actually tweak those root letters and still maintain the essence of the Sinhala script?
That's where the real creativity comes in.
Okay.
Designers can experiment with things like the thickness of the strokes,
Okay.
the angle of the curves, the size and shape of the eyes, and even the terminals of the strokes, the way they end.
It's like having a set of knobs and dials for each root letter.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Allowing the designer to fine-tune the style and personality of the typeface.
Exactly.
By adjusting these parameters,
Right.
you can create typefaces that range from traditional and elegant to modern and playful, all while staying true to the core visual principles of Sinhala script.
It's incredible how much nuance and flexibility is packed into those root letters.
Yeah, it is.
What about existing Sinhala typefaces?
Yes.
Did the thesis delve into their history as well?
It did. The thesis documented and analyzed a wide range of historical typefaces, from the very first Sinhala typeface created in the 18th century all the way to modern digital fonts. It's an amazing collection of typographic history.
Walk me through this typographic timeline. What were some of the key milestones in the evolution of Sinhala typefaces?
Well, as we touched on earlier, the arrival of the printing press in Sri Lanka was a major turning point. The first Sinhala typeface, created by a Dutch typographer named Gabriel Schade in the 1730s, really set the stage for everything that followed.
I remember reading about Shade's typeface in the excerpts you sent. It was fascinating to learn how he drew inspiration from handwritten Sinhala scripts of that era, trying to capture the essence of calligraphy in a printed form.
Those early typefaces were quite large.
Yeah.
And were mainly used for official documents and religious texts.
Okay.
Then with the rise of newspapers in the 19th century, we see smaller, more condensed typefaces being developed for readability in longer blocks of text.
The typefaces themselves adapted to the changing ways people were consuming information.
Precisely. And as technology progressed, Sinhala typefaces went through another major transformation with the advent of digital typesetting. This opened up a whole new world of possibilities for typeface design, allowing for much greater precision and stylistic experimentation.
But I imagine the transition to digital also brought its share of challenges.
Yes.
Didn't the thesis mention something about the difficulties of maintaining originality and consistency in the digital age?
Yes. That was a key point, with digital fonts being so easy to copy and modify. The need to protect intellectual property and preserve the integrity of Sinhala typeface designs became paramount. The thesis really stresses the importance of establishing clear typographic standards and guidelines for the digital era.
It's a good reminder that even with all the advancements in technology, the fundamental principles of good typeface design are still crucial.
Absolutely. And those principles are rooted in a deep understanding of the script's anatomy, its historical context, and the cultural nuances it embodies.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the depth and complexity of typography.
I agree.
It's such a fascinating blend of art, history, and technology.
And there's still so much more to uncover.
Yeah.
But before we move on to the final part of this deep dive, let's pause for a moment.
Okay.
What's been the most intriguing discovery for you so far? Have you gained a new appreciation for the intricate details that make up Sinhala typefaces?
We're back for the final part of our deep dive into the anatomy of Sinhala typefaces.
Yeah.
Before we paused, we were traveling through time, exploring how Sinhala fonts evolved from those early printing press days to the digital era. It's amazing how those fonts have changed.
Yeah.
Reflecting the shifts in technology and the way we use type.
It really shows the adaptability of the script itself.
Yeah.
And the thesis takes this idea of adaptation even further.
Okay.
By looking at how specific visual features of Sinhala typefaces change over time.
Okay, so we're going from the broad historical view to a closer look at the fonts themselves. What kind of visual features are we talking about here?
Well, remember those distinct visual properties, or DVPs, we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
The thesis dives into how those properties show up in different typefaces.
Okay.
Analyzing things like contrast, axis terminals, and even something called the hand of the font.
So we're dissecting each typeface, looking at its individual parts.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this contrast and axis business.
Sure.
It sounds a bit technical.
Think of contrast like the difference between a whisper and a shout.
Okay.
It's the difference in thickness
between
the thickest and thinnest strokes of a letter. Some typefaces have high contrast with really dramatic variations in stroke weight, while others have low contrast with more uniform strokes.
So a typeface with high contrast would have bolder, more pronounced strokes.
Exactly. And the axis refers to the angle of those strokes.
Okay.
Especially the curved ones.
Okay.
You can imagine a line running through the center of the letter.
So a typeface with a vertical axis would have strokes that are mostly upright.
Yeah.
While a typeface with a diagonal axis would have strokes that slant to the right or left.
Exactly. And by analyzing these features across historical typefaces, the thesis uncovered some interesting trends.
Okay.
Early Sinhala typefaces, for example, tended to have lower contrast and more vertical axes. This was probably due to the limitations
of the tools and techniques used in manual typesetting back then.
Those early fonts were shaped by the hands that created them.
That's a great way to put it. And as technology advanced, we see a shift towards higher contrast and more dynamic axes in Sinhala typefaces.
Okay.
Reflecting the increased precision and flexibility of digital typesetting.
So it's not just the shape of the letters that's evolving, but the qualities of the strokes themselves.
That's right. And these subtle details have a huge impact on the overall style and personality of a typeface.
Yeah.
The thesis even goes into detail about the hand of a font.
Okay.
Which is the overall impression you get from the typeface. Like it was written by a specific person. It refers to the style, the feeling.
Fonts have personalities. Like some are more formal and others are more casual.
Exactly. The hand of a font is often conveyed through subtle things.
Okay.
Like the shape of the terminals. That's the end of a stroke.
Right.
The amount of curve in the strokes.
Yeah.
And even the spacing between the letters.
So each typeface has its own unique voice and style. By understanding these visual features, we can appreciate the artistry, but also get a sense of the history and culture behind them.
Absolutely. And this is where the thesis makes a really important point.
Okay.
It argues that understanding the anatomy of Sinhala typefaces isn't just an academic exercise. It's crucial for preserving and promoting the richness and diversity of Sinhala script in the digital age.
So it's about ensuring that Sinhala script thrives and continues to evolve in our digital world.
Exactly. And the thesis provides a roadmap for achieving that.
Okay.
Outlining key principles for designing Sinhala typefaces for the digital world that are legible, beautiful, and culturally sensitive.
This deep dive has truly been an eye-opener. I always took fonts for granted. But now I see them in a whole new light. They're more than just letters. They're a tapestry of history, culture, and artistic expression.
That's what's so fascinating about typography. By diving into the details of letterforms, we unlock a world of knowledge and insight that connects us to the past, informs the present, and shapes the future of written communication.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From ancient cave inscriptions to digital font design.
It's been a journey.
It has. What I'm taking away from this is that even the tiniest details in a script carry cultural and historical significance.
I agree. And that significance applies to any writing system used throughout history.
That leaves us with a thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
What other scripts have hidden stories waiting to be discovered?
Oh, yeah.
What typographic treasures are out there waiting to be explored and celebrated?
Good question.
I'm ready to continue this journey of discovery, and I hope you, our listeners, are too. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the anatomy of Sinhala typefaces.
It's been a pleasure. Keep exploring the fascinating world of typography.